Hi, my name is Troy Cabida. I'm a poet. I like to say that I work in poetry. So that means I write poetry, I edit poetry, I perform poetry, I publish poetry, and at the moment I work in a library specializing in contemporary modern poetry at the National Poetry Library. So my day job is essentially poetry. I never thought I'd be able to say that, but yeah, it's nice to be working every day in poetry.
And how would you say you found your way into poetry? Or how
Um,
did poetry find its way to you, is my
Oh,
alternative question.
I remember being a child in the Philippines. So I was born and raised in the Philippines, and then I moved to the UK when I was 12. And I remember when I was a kid, I really wanted to be a writer, like a novelist or a comic book writer, because I watched Encantadia growing up, and a lot of superhero stuff, and and cartoons, and I wanted to write stories about my friends and I being superheroes. And I thought, oh, maybe that's my future. I'll be a writer, ganyan. But then when I got to the UK, I studied English literature at GCSE. And in year 11, that's when they introduced us to poetry. And also, like a segue, at that point, I was doing a BTech in performing arts alongside my GCSEs because I thought I wanted to be an actor as well. But then my teacher, who was very kind, said that whenever I'd be performing on stage or on camera, I would always be performing as myself and never the character, and that's considered like not a good thing in acting because you never truly embody the character. I never persuade the audience that I'm as the character. And at that time, we were also doing a module where we were um, doing behind the scenes work for a play. And I was in charge of the script, of writing the script and devising it and making sure that it's being delivered every week on time. And then during that time, she told me, your acting is not there yet, but your writing, it's just, you're such a good writer, and not just from a crafts perspective, but also from like a technical perspective. I knew how to deliver work on time. And she said, I think your strength is in writing. And then fast forward to learning about poetry in GCSE. I I wrote one poem after my first lesson at school, and then I never stopped. Um, and then that ended up with me writing poems until I started getting published in 2013. And then as I developed a portfolio of work, I got into the Barbican Young Poets, which is this program led by Jacob Rose, who you know, who we meet every fortnight at the Barbican, where we develop our work and sort of build a community of poets. At the end of the showcase, we end of the program, we have a showcase where we perform our work to an audience. And at that point, I remember having to perform my poems on stage, and I was like, "Oh God, how am I gonna do this? I'm not a good actor." But then, as I learned quite quickly, that the best readings and performances I've done are when I'm channeling kind of like an amplified version of myself through my poetry. And that goes in line with what my teacher said to me years ago, who said, you're always yourself when you're on stage. So I took that and I kind of learned how to use it to my advantage to when performing poetry, because at the end of the day, poetry does feel like accessing a raw and kind of unfiltered version of yourself. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I find that there's like a certain skill set between page poetry and spoken word poetry, and that like the acting and the performance bit.
Mm.
Would you say you approach writing poetry and then writing poetry to be performed? Would
Um,
you say there's a difference or?
a lot of people would say so, and I see where they're coming from. But I come from a sort of school of training where both have both have performing poetry and page poetry have like a cyclical relationship. Jacob Rose, who I'll be referring to the whole interview, coined the term, what was it he said? Good for the stage, good for the page. If a poem is good to be performed on stage and it can stand on its own inside a book read by someone else without you in the room, then the poem is considered successful. And that's kind of been the mantra that I've followed through subconsciously as a writer, especially as a poet, because performing is a form of developing the poem, in my opinion. I've learned to kind of use open mics and, immediate responses from the audience as a way of like, okay, this is how I then can edit the poem, or like even as I'm performing it, if for example, if I perform a poem for the first time and I trip on a sentence, or I like automatically like proofread the poem as I'm reading it, which I do all the time, that's a sign for me that something is kind of I missed something when I'm writing the poem that the performance is allowing me to see. So they go hand in hand, and yeah, I really encourage a lot of poets to kind of include performance in their toolbox because it's fun. I find it really fun.
You mentioned that you are an alumnus of the Barbican Young Poets and also the Roundhouse Collective, and you're also a producer for the London Open Mic Night, Poetry and Shaah. How would you say being part of these communities has influenced and shaped you as a poet?
Um, I think the biggest thing I've learned from being part of those communities has to do a lot with how I become part of a community or like an ecosystem of poets and creatives or artists. Um, I've learned very early on that a safe space is truly only safe if everyone makes it so. Um, and Jacob and Rachel Long, who ran Barbican Young Poets, and also Cecilia Knapp and Bridget Minamore at the Roundhouse, they've taught me just through osmosis, just kind of through being around them, that a space can only truly be conducive to creativity and play, which are the results of safety, the byproducts of people feeling open and feeling comfortable enough to be themselves and to be in relationship with other people. That's only really possible if everyone makes it so.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of craft, I can't remember because I was very young. I don't remember much. I can't tell you anything about like how to write a poem, but I think that's not the most important thing. Um, I find that really, you know, I don't like to use the word transferable skill, but it is something that I've learned how to kind of use in my other jobs and in other group settings that I wouldn't have been able to learn had it not been for those programs. And also with Poetry and Shaah, that's a poetry night that I run with many of my personal friends that I just happen to be poets. And again, that taught me a lot about how to kind of um work with people truly because it could have working with two of my closest friends who were I met when we were 12 at school. We weren't poets. That could have gone super left turn, but we learned how to kind of remember that at the end of the day, it's a job
Mm.
and it's just a show. It's just a potion night. You know what I mean? It's never that serious. But at the end of the day, it's also very serious. It's also very what we were doing was community led. It was also political. It was a movement. It was to amplify Black and Brown voices who were coming up in poetry. So we recognize the responsibility in that, but also the joy and kind of the holding of hands that happened because of that show is something that we took seriously, but also took lightly. And I think that was the secret to to the success. So.
I love that phrase of an ecosystem of poets. How
Mhm.
once you know, like I find that with like Filipino writers in general as well, once you know one person, you kind of know you start to know the others
Yeah.
in the same
Yeah.
community. And speaking of the ecosystem of poets and poets knowing each other, in preparation for this interview, I read some of your past interviews. So back
Oh,
in
mm.
2023, you spoke with the Strand magazine, answering the question I wanted to ask, and that's why I was doing research. So I wasn't asking like the same questions again and again.
No,
Which
it's
was
okay.
who were the poets that influenced you the most? And you mentioned one of your poetic influences was and is Filipino American poet Joseph Legaspi.
Hmm.
Then I had a look at Neon Manila's page on the Nine Arches Press website, where I saw Joseph Legaspi himself praise and describe your collection, saying the poems illuminate in their flirtatious ways of dressing and undressing, revealing the brown boy self, silhouetted, accessorized, winterized, muscular, vulnerable. I guess my question now is in three parts. How does it feel to have one of the poets you cited as influential to your own work 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, speak about your debut collection with such praise?
It's such an honor. I think Joseph Legaspi, he, so we know of each other. We know we know each other. Um, but when I approached him for a blurb, I was like, he probably doesn't know who I am. I mean, so I emailed him, hi, my name is Troy. I'd love for you to blurb my book. I was just like, threw it in the air. I was like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, that's absolutely fine. And then he replied to me very soon after and said, "Oh, we were meant to meet up before the pandemic." I don't know if you remember, but Roman and Ante was organizing a meetup for the three of us. And I was like, oh my God, I don't remember that. But it was nice, because apparently, there's been a rapport already. And as you say, being Filipino poets and writers, there's a solidarity there from the beginning because at the moment, there's not so many of us in the UK. So to have any connection is very great, it's gratifying. How does it feel to have him blurb my book? I mean, his Neon Manila would not exist had it not been for his book Threshold, which I read back and forth. And to know that there are Filipino queer poets out there writing and creating spaces and helping other people move forward with their career is something that I aspire to be. And I find that really inspiring. And for him to have spent time to read my book and provide a blurb for it, it's a big honor. So yeah, in Tagalog, you say nakakakilig. Yeah,
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 me too. And I was just seeing the connections between your past
yeah,
interviews, and it was like, oh my God, Troy did
yeah,
it.
yeah.
My second question links with the way Joseph Legaspi talks about that flirtatious ways of addressing and undressing accessorized vulnerable. I've been really lucky to have read a few of your poems from your upcoming collection. Thank you so much for sending a few of them over. With poems like Sando and You Walked into School Wearing Your Mother's Boots, and then in War Dove, with its themes of authenticity, identity, soaring with unfoldings, redefinitions, as R.A. Villanueva said. And especially in Symmetric of Bone, how the whole pamphlet itself is inspired by the life and work of Tiffany and Co's jewelry designer, Elsa Peretti. Can you talk to us more about your exploration of fashion, beauty, art, and design, and how that might have helped you explore certain truths in your poetry?
That's such a, I remember when I was starting out with poetry in the UK, people were kind of expecting me to write about like food and migration and working in healthcare and what's it like to live in Boracay. And it's like I don't know any of those things. I'm a terrible cook. I don't work in healthcare. My family does, but I don't
Mm.
want to write about their experiences because that felt like excavation of information, quite unethical. Um, and that's something that I fought against quite, on an eternal level because people were like, oh, you're a Filipino poet, so you have to write about adobo, obviously. It's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And when my first pamphlet came out, War Dove, people started then kind of in the kindest way possible. They started what felt like typecasting me into writing, this poet who writes about toxic masculinity and the ways in which queerness and masculinity merged together, which was a lot of what the book was about. And I was like, huh, that's nice. But it got to a point where I was writing a poem about, I remember there's a poem in the book about a cat. And they were like, oh, it's about, how terrible it is to be gay, right? I goes, no, no, it's about a cat.
Yeah, it's inspired by BTS. Is it that
Exactly.
one?
Yeah, 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 exactly. It's a serendipity song. Yeah, exactly. Thanks for noticing. And I was like, oh, okay, so they didn't get it. I was like, that's okay. And then I remember lockdown, I was at home for about 4 to 5 months. And at this point, the pamphlet had come out, and I thought, okay, well, what do I do next? And I kind of ran out of the kind of a stimulus that would normally have made me write poems because I was at home all the time. So I was like, oh, what do I do? Then I started thinking a lot about my relationship with clothes and fashion because I was doing a lot of online shopping at the time. And I've thought about how, in many ways, clothing has informed my relationship with my body and my queerness more so than my relationship with men, when it comes to queerness. And it's like, okay, well, if queerness isn't just about sexuality and it isn't just about, it can be about objects and clothing and fashion, what can I say about that? So I just kind of went ahead and wrote poems that felt right, poems about shopping and how fun it is to shop. And then in that vein, I started thinking about, oh, what happens if I buy these pair of sunglasses from Victoria Beckham? That's fun. And then what if I wear it? Um, what are the politics there? Because obviously there's going to be politics about these pieces of clothing that are often associated and marketed as belonging to white bodies. What happens when they are worn by a queer Asian male body? What happens? Is there a tension there? And that's kind of been the crux of what Neon Manila is, or will be, exploring that tension there, and the silencing of it as well. Because I remember when I was exploring writing about fashion and clothing and jewelry, there was a bit of like, parang, how do you say it? It's like not looking down, but it's a bit of, oh, that's a bit, I don't know about that. I think there's a bit of a kind of pushing to one
Mm.
side because I think people didn't expect at that time specifically to kind of see the politics there, which is very gendered and quite sexualized, obvious, in many ways. But I pushed through because I found the challenge there, and a lot of my joy in writing Neon Manila is to prove people wrong that hey, as a Filipino poet, I can write about turtlenecks. I can write about like yellow jumpers and stuff like that, or like my Chelsea boots that crack against the cement all the time, or in the case of the Elsa Peretti pamphlet, I was zoomed in into kind of that vein of thinking, but specifically through the relationship with Elsa Peretti's jewelry designs, which were again produced for the working woman of the 1970s in America. So what happens? I was curious to kind of see what kind of poems will come out when I think about the friction or the flow or this symmetry or the kind of asymmetry of my body wearing the bone cuff, which you often see in like on like supermodels, so and then how that then spills into to sex and sexuality and perceptions of my body as queer, especially in today's context. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I'm never gonna stop talking about it, I guess. So you need to stop me now.
No, no, keep talking. It's making me more excited to read the rest of Me in Manila. I had a little teaser with
Yeah.
the poems you sent me, and I'm like, I wasn't lying when I said, you single-handedly reignited my love for poetry with just those those
Very kind.
samples.
Very kind.
I'm not just saying
Yeah.
that. But yes, I'm also interested to hear your thoughts on the relationship between languages. You know, you use Tagalog words as titles for your poems, such as Ladlad in Wardav and Sando in Neon
Mm.
Manila. And in past interviews, you talk about how you refuse to italicize Tagalog words. How do you approach this? I would say conversation between writing in English while, as you put it, staying faithful to your relationship with the language.
I think it's all about understanding your relationship with these languages as a person, from a personal subjective perspective, and also then understanding how then your poetics can and should represent that relationship best. I work with a lot of poets who are also speaking in different languages, and when I see them italicizing their mother tongue as opposed to when they speak right in English, I always ask, why are you doing that? Like
Mhm.
what is the purpose? Is it just to sort of further provide an aesthetic to the linguistic difference, or is there more to it? Are you further kind of how you say kind of um parang amplifying the existence of this language within the poem more than the English? And again, I ask why? Why are you doing that? Because you don't, I think the risk is always the kind of, you don't want to other yourself. You don't want to pander to the kind of the exotifying of different languages just because they aren't English, especially if that goes against with your subjective lived experience with these languages. Because for me, I was born in the Philippines, and I still speak Tagalog today. But at the same time, I've lived in the UK for about 18 years now, and I speak English as well, just as badly as I speak Tagalog terribly. Like I do think genuinely I speak both languages awfully. Um, but that kind of was my way, recognizing that and finding a way to express it in my poems has been a kind of, it's made me feel quite liberated because then that means when I write poems, if a Tagalog word is a better way of expressing that feeling, I would do so. Because it's true to who I am. And you know, uh, people would say, "Oh, but what about the audience? Why don't you put a translation there?" I'm like, I don't want to do that as well, because I read other poems in different languages and they don't have translations, and I don't feel offended. I don't feel singled out. It just means I need to like do my own research. Um, and I always encourage people to do that with their own poetics because it kind of allows both languages equal amounts of gravitas and dignity, I think, and truth, especially to your relationship with them. So that's where I'm at. Yeah. And it's fun. It's fun because then conversations like this happen, and then kind of that dialogue happens, and then people start thinking about, okay, how do I then approach my own languages through writing? So,
I love that. I love that because I always the whole like italicizing Tagalog or non-English words is always there's always that conversation around it that I find so interesting, and different writers would have different opinions about why they shouldn't. Yeah. So I love hearing you talk about it.
mm.
My next question, you kind of touched upon it, but if you have any more to say, how would you say that your British Filipino identity influences and inspires your poetry?
Mm, I think my British Filipino identity, that's funny you asked that question because I just got an email today confirming that my application for citizenship has been approved. So I'm officially, well, once I get the ceremony, I'm officially a citizen of the UK. Yeah, so how does that inspire my work? I think it motivates it forward because the more that I come into terms with the fact that not wholly Filipino, I'm also not wholly British. I find the position of myself within that conversation, and within there, I can really excavate the kind of stories and lived experiences and feelings and kind of sensations from that position. So really, when I kind of think more about it, that's where the stories come out. That's where the poems come in, and that's where the perspectives of the poems come in. And it feels easier to write poems when I know exactly where they're coming from. I remember Rachel Long said we did an exercise a poetry exercise where we were writing kind of in response to a poem by Wash and Shirei. And the poem was about um, the speaker speaking to someone who's going through cancer, and the speaker was imagining light coming out of their body, and that was the cancer kind of like illuminating their body. And I wrote a poem kind of in other on the other perspective where I was the person going through the cancer, and she read the poem and she said, "I see what you were trying to do here, but you risk the kind of not trouble, but kind of you risk being inauthentic or taking up space." Or like speaking over someone else. And that's something I've always been mindful of. Even though she wasn't telling me I did something wrong, I was always been like, okay, well, never gonna do that ever again. And that thinking has led me to kind of then really like problematize and analyze where I am and what that means for me. Um, because there's so much to say. There's so much to say about it.
I
Yeah.
love that. Not a poet, but I remember reading an interview with Kazuo Ishiguro. I did my
Mm.
dissertation in him, my undergraduate dissertation in his books solely because I wanted to read more of his books and have a reason, like have an excuse to write
Nice,
about it. And
nice. Yeah.
he was talking about what you were talking about as well, about like that liminal space between you in the UK, you're not you don't feel as British, but in the Philippines, you're also not as Filipino. And because he's British, Japanese, and because his name is in like obviously Japanese, people expect him have expectations related to how his name is portrayed and how what kind of stuff
Mm,
he should write about. And that was like the kind of the crux of my dissertation. It's like that liminal space between writing two cultures and not like having that middle bit.
mm.
Yeah. Um, My next question is, are there any particular themes, topics, emotions that you find yourself returning to when you write poetry, even if they take different forms?
Yes. Yes. What do I write about at the moment? I'm writing new poems at the moment because we've just finished the book. So Neon Manila is officially finished. Yeah, I suppose I know just a few more edits. But officially, like my publisher's like it's finished now. So right now, I'm trying to experiment writing new poems, and I think I'm actually writing my second collection, which is exciting, but also like Troy, go to sleep. And I find myself, what am I writing about? Clothing will always kind of be like a constant theme or like a constant object for me to hold on to. I don't think they're as much of a focus at the moment. I think right now they're kind of melting into the narrative and becoming like catalysts for the poem to move forward, as opposed to them being being the actual jewel around. I think I'll always write about, relationships with men, not necessarily sexual or romantic, but just like that fascinating thing because men are crazy, men are messed up, and I'm always interested in writing about that because as a man and also a queer person, a queer man, I find relationships with men to be like just so fascinating. So there's that as well, and also like humor. That's not a theme, but like writing through the voice of humor and finding the levity in a situation is something that has become very comfortable for me. So as I am writing constantly towards that, I'm also being mindful of it and thinking about what happens when you stop using that tool. And actually it becomes very vulnerable and very scary. So thank God I'm in therapy.
I thank God you're a poet. You can write.
No, 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 no. Thank God I have a therapist. Yeah.
Um, yes, so you published two pamphlets, War Dove and Symmetric of Bone. What was that process like? And was there anything you've learned about yourself, about writing, about publishing during that process?
Oh, with the pamphlets. I think one of the things I've learned about myself is that I'm very good at the other side of writing a book. Not just like crafting the book or editing it or working with an editor, but actually like the promoting of it and figuring out how to move it forward as an object to kind of accelerate my career. I find that really fun. And kind of, it's an important part of a writer's work to know how to like speak to people about it and to kind of promote it. But I didn't know how much of it I actually enjoyed, um, until I had to do it. So, because for War Dove, that came out May of 2020, so that was the first lockdown. So I was doing all of the promotion of the book online in my bedroom right now where I am. A lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Instagram lives, a lot of article writing. So that's something that I really enjoy doing. With Symmetric of Bone, I learned a lot about doing it from a physical perspective, like actually doing shows and handling that kind of response from like a physical perspective was very fun. What else? I think working with both different editors has been helpful. With Bad Betty Press, it was my first time, and Amy Aker, who was my editor, was very very kind and very hands-on, and had a lot of like big comments to say about the book, which was helpful. It taught me a lot about how to defend my work as well, because she's had a lot of thoughts in the book that I disagreed with, and I thought leading up to it that I was gonna kind of like just say yes to everything, but I thought no, 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 this is my book, and I'm gonna say no in the kindest way possible, and that's something that I held on to, especially working with other publishers.
Mhm.
And with Ben at 14 Poems is very good at promoting online. And I learned a lot about how to kind of juggle all of that because he was very prolific and I learned how to catch up with him. But yeah, yeah.
Will we see these things manifest in your upcoming collection, Neon Manila? Will you do a similar thing? Do you have ideas of how you'd approach the talking about the collection, promoting it?
Yeah, Neo Manila is kind of I would say the most chronically online I'll become. Because the book has a lot of influences from pop music. It's also like a theme of the book. I really enjoyed writing about the queer body's relationship with pop music, especially because at the time when I was writing it, a lot of people were writing in response to jazz and hip hop and rock music, which were fantastic. But then I wanted to write about poems in response to like Hilary Duff or BTS and all these things. And people were like, "Oh, Troy, that's a bit, it's not as serious." And but I thought, no, I'm gonna find a way. And then the book ended up becoming very Sabrina Carpenter coded, very Janelle Monáe. There's a lot of Kylie there, Um, the book had a sequence of BTS sonnets, but I took it out because I feel like it needs to go somewhere else. Maybe when they come back. Um, and yeah, I ended up recording about 10 poems from the manuscript to and then I asked several of my musician friends to set the poems into original music, as a way of kind of what do you call it? Parang sorry, as a way of, oh God, my brain's gone. It's kind of like I'm commemorating the fact that pop music has been formative to this book's creation. Um, so the first single came out end of May. It's called Slowed and Reverb. The second single is called On Normativity, which is coming on my birthday. And then the third single it's called My Daddy Baby, and it's coming out the National Poetry Day in October. So it's like an album rollout, what I was doing with the singles, and there's music videos accompanied with them as well, as a way of finding my own way of promoting the book. Because I don't know, I just think it's really funny to kind of treat the book as like a pop album, and people have responded very well to the track so far. People have played them that too. So yeah, and I've worked with different musicians. I worked with Justin de Guzman from the Philippines. He worked with June Marizi, who's now called Sundrop Garden. I've worked with Gabriel Jones, aka Bumpkin, Will Rene, also called as Hack Mystic, Late Kid as well, and what am I missing? Oh, Pearl Home Records as well recorded one of my poems, and they released it as a vinyl in April. So that's been a joy doing the music part because I never thought I'd be able to find people to do it with. But yeah, that's kind of the fun of it. I'm also interested in doing like social media stuff. Maybe I'll do TikToks or something. I don't know. I don't know. I'll be as humiliating as possible just so people can buy this book.
Well, I
Yeah.
personally really enjoyed the first slow plus reverb.
Yeah,
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 I
yeah.
really enjoyed that one. So I can't wait to see the rest. And I love the idea of, because pop culture references is so rife in this collection, as you mentioned, that you thought, I'm gonna make an album. Make a
Yeah, yeah,
music
yeah.
album. Genius
Because,
promotion.
yeah, because I have a lot of poets who also work in music and music production. And so I thought, why not, right? To kind of make use of that and like collaborate with them and, give them the opportunity to produce something that they would also want to consider their own as well. Because I remember working with them and they were like, Troy, what do you want to do? I'm like, no, what do you want to do? The poem is mine, the music is yours. Let's do something that we both can claim as our own because that's what I want. Also, the music videos are fun as well. So yeah, for the third video, I worked with Ray Roberts, who's a fantastic British Filipino videographer and photographer. And yeah, I can't wait for you to see it.
I can't wait to see it. You mentioned, or you've hinted towards, what kind of inspirations you had behind the pop culture references, music. Can you talk to us more about this upcoming collection? How did Neon Manila come about?
The book was formed in sort of like summer of 2020. I watched this movie on Netflix called Dead Kids, which is a Filipino film. It's about a group of teenage boys, middle class teenage Filipino boys, who wanted to like, I can't remember the plot now, but I think they were like trying to like do a drug heist or something. Um, it's a very silly movie, but what struck me was how beautiful they shot Manila at night because there was a lot of neon lights everywhere, and it just looks so gritty and urban, but also quite beautiful and soft as well. And I found the kind of the poetry in that, especially as someone who I've been, people have always asked me what it's like to live in rural Philippines, and I said, no, I don't know what that means because I grew up in the Kilburn of the Philippines. I'm very urban as a human being. And I remember moving to the UK, and all my Filipino friends were like, "Oh, isn't it so stressful living in the city?" I'm like, "No, this is what I've learned all my whole life." And I think that kind of positionality is something that I really leaned into when I was writing Neon Manila, because it's a way of like actually hammering onto in this book that I am an urban Filipino body, and my poems are going to be decidedly set in the city. Um, and so that was like the geographical location of these poems, and then from there was a lot of concentrations on sort of how my queerness has manifested, has grown, has developed with me as I've gotten older, and how that then informs my relationship with my body, and then with clothing and jewelry, and then with my relationships with other people. And again, I think the driving force here is humor. Humor as a way of kind of talking about the politics of the situations that I write about. Because I think there are a lot of instances of racism and homophobia in this book, but the way that the poems write them or like depict them is kind of finding the humor in the ridiculousness and in the violence of them, because that's kind of, we always say that we use humor as a coping mechanism, and I think that's been a way of for me to kind of write, to kind of truthfully tell these stories in poetry, because that's kind of how I deal with life at the moment, kind of like trying to laugh it off, which isn't healthy. I'm not saying that, but it is a truthful response. And I wanted to provide space for that in my poems because that feels truthful and accurate, and it doesn't feel like I'm over sensationalizing a situation, if that makes sense. Keeping as grounded and as true as possible, even at its heights.
Beautiful. I love how you're like, this is urban city Filipino. I'm the opposite. I grew up in the province. So
Nice, yes.
everything I write is like countryside Philippines.
But
I
you
love
do
that.
that beautifully, though. You do that beautifully with
Thank
mythology and
you.
stuff.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And
Yeah,
that's your strength. So,
thank you. But yes, I love that. In the process of writing the poems in the end, Manila, was there anything you found surprising?
how well people responded. We mean during the writing of it.
Yeah. Or
Uh,
after, or responses is one of them as well.
well, guys, during the writing, I think I found the easiness of it to be quite surprising.
Mm.
Because Symmetric of Bone was written after Neon Manila. So, I was already in that brain space while I was writing Neon Manila and Symmetrical Bone. Hence why there are some poems from the pamphlet in Neon Manila. So the book that came before this is War Dove, which was extremely sad and and kind of it was melancholy, the book, which needed to be the case, and there was catharsis in that as well. But I thought at that point that that's the only kind of poems I should be writing, or I can be writing, or poems that will be received well. Um, then I started to kind of try to write towards beauty and light and humor and ease and lightness, not necessarily writing like la la poems, like obviously there's a lot of weight and darkness even in light, but like using that as like a goal or like a hand to hold was something that I found very surprising because it opened up so much to me. Like it actually told me that, hey, even here, even in what seems to be frivolous and kaartehan is in Tagalog, there's still so much to say, so much politics and so much um complications and complexities that maybe actually the silencing of these objects, there's a reason behind that, if that makes sense. There's this TikTok by Bretman Rock that I saved where he was like, "Oh, we should reclaim the word maarte," and he stopped using it as an insult, but actually like as a way of describing a baddie or something. That was very funny. But again, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm kind of trying to see the meat and the substance in what is considered just nothing, just like vapid and pretty, you know. So
So when the collection is finally released into the world, what are you most excited about for readers to discover?
that Filipino subjectivity isn't just one thing. Isn't a monolith. Even though we always say it, we always say that, oh, Filipino, every race is not a monolith, but specifically because we can speak about, in Filipino terms, people always say, oh no, we're all very different people, but I still don't feel like that's quite reflective at the moment with where we are at in publishing. Um, so I hope that if people read the book, well, hopefully they do, and that they like it, I hope that they can take away the fact that, hey, as a Filipino person, I can also enjoy my body. I can also enjoy my erotic power, enjoy shopping, and believe that I can find myself in these objects and reach a higher relationship with myself and with others through these things. And they're not just kaartehan or wala lang, and that even the most mundane, everyday things, there's still a lot to say, and that this book feels like an effort to go against the grain in many ways. And I hope that if people read the book, they can also feel the same, that they can also do the same for themselves, however that looks.
I love that. Like, I completely agree that the whole Filipinos are not a monolith, because I feel the same way when people talk about like Philippine mythology. I'm like, there's different regions, and every region is a
Mm-hmm.
different. I could talk
Mm-hmm.
about it for ages. All right, that was my final question, but I have a few that I'd love to
Let's
as
do it.
a poet that's currently on a break. I
Nice.
love
Yeah.
hearing, and as a writer in general, I love hearing process of writing and how writers go about this. I'd love to hear, what advice would you give to an aspiring poet, just starting
What
out or in
advice?
their early years, or
I would suggest them to read. I say that as someone who isn't a reader. Like find, I don't think I have the time to read, but I would push everyone to read as much as they can. Read what you like and be critical about why you like it. And then when you have the time, read something that you probably don't like. And if you don't like it, push through with it and figure out why you don't like it. I can only really suggest things from my experience. I would say go to open mic nights if you're interested in performing. You don't have to perform. You can just absorb, you can just watch. Also, because I also did a lot of like free sort of like work experiences for like online journals and publications. So like being like a sub editor or like an editorial assistant for like a poetry journal here and there. I would also suggest to do that as well because a huge part of poetry work involves getting a lot of rejections from magazines and publications, as you would know. And I would suggest you to kind of be part of that system and to know what it's like to be on the other side, so that when you receive a rejection, it isn't such a like this alien concept. You'll realize why you get a rejection, and it's never ever ever personal. Um, and I guess also specifically for Filipino poets and writers, I think if I can be a bit malalim here, um, you know, it isn't being a writer and being Filipino is often seen as like two things that don't go together. Or like it's very difficult or it's quite hard to kind of navigate that world as a Filipino person. I'm glad that that's not as much of the case now, because especially in London, there's so many Filipino poets doing spoken word now and doing a lot of rapping. And I know someone called the Metaphorist who produces open mic nights in South London. He's doing such a good job. It's like, oh my God, if you were only there when I was starting out, it would have been a different experience. But I'm glad that they exist now. Um, and I would suggest, anyone coming up, and if you ever feel a bit like an anomaly or a bit alienated or a bit, oh, I should just do something else. If you really want to do it, you should carry on and see how long see where it takes you. Not how long it takes you, but where it takes you. Um, because there's something there. If you feel it in your heart and your chest, there's truth to that, and then you should focus on it because, only you can make it for yourself. And if they don't understand, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's okay, you know, go lang.
go lang. I
Yeah.
love that. Or do what I do, which is reach out to random Filipino writers, and then you find out that they're so generous.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
if they're
Yeah,
like
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't have time, they'll say it kindly and like, maybe next time. Anyway,
But as long as you've made the connection, as long as you've made the relationship, and that's all that it takes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I find it ironic that your advice is read more, except for I don't read more, but you're also a librarian.
Oh, what? Sorry. Oh, yeah. I think that's also part of the reason why I haven't read much because as a librarian, the books I touch are just like to go back in the shelf, I like give to a patron. So, I think the reading part is lost on me a little bit. But I am doing my best. I am reading. I am reading poems as much as I can.
As much as you can,
Yeah.
yeah. What was the best advice that you've received, whether it's writing poetry or navigating the poetry world?
Oh, best advice I've received. One thing I do remember, a very good poet friend of mine named Jeremiah Brown, who goes by the name Sugar J Poet, once told me before all the pamphlets came out. I told him, Jeremiah, I want a pamphlet. I don't know how that's gonna happen. Then he goes, Troy, if you are struggling to kind of create a manuscript out of your work, just remember that you are the central, like the kind of central focus, or like the main tissue of all your poems, the connecting tissue to all of your poems, and that you don't have to kind of compile these poems chronologically of creation. You can create a narrative out of them through your own experience at the moment, so that you can create a body of work that is outside of their origins and even outside of yourself. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's really helpful. And that's how I've been making manuscripts up until this day, and how I can feel confident in knowing that the body of works I put out don't necessarily need me in order for them to work, because the when I was compiling them, they were already it was already doing so in a way that means that they can kind of live on their own, because they are telling a story that is technically not mine anymore, if that makes sense. You know, like Neon Manila, like I wrote the poems I wrote in that book, they're not structured chronologically, if that makes sense. It's kind of like when, when singers write about talk about albums, and they write the songs, and then they kind of order them differently so that they all go together. That's kind of how it works with the books as well.
And my final question, which is usually the only question I don't include in my thing that I sent in advance to people I try to interview, is that if you were interviewed again, what question would you wish you were asked?
Oh, I would ask like something like, what would you suggest poets when it comes to working as poets? You know, like what kind of tip would you tell them to kind of how to better navigate the world as a poet from a working perspective, not from a crafts perspective. Like how do you navigate performing? How do you navigate admin work? How do you navigate day jobs and stuff like that? How do you navigate working with poets and producers and editors and publishers, so that you can create like rapport and like human but also very efficient relationships with them?
Mm. Okay,
You know,
Troy.
that's some yeah.
So how would you navigate
Yeah,
the
yeah,
poetry world as a working poet?
yeah. How would I suggest that? I remember when I started, as a Barbican Young Poet, that was 2016. I was 21, and it was, and we were doing the spoken word scene, and open micing, and um doing my own shows and all these things. But at that time, it felt much, there was a huge game element, there was a huge play element to it. It was all buddies coming together, doing these shows and providing space for one another. And then after the show, we'd go have drinks or like have dinner and like, I don't know, like play video games afterwards. It was very much like, I call it the Studio 54 era of my writing career, where we were just having fun, and like partying, all that, like creating movements, social movements, but at the same time, just having fun. The downside of that was that it didn't feel like a job to me. It didn't feel like something that I could take seriously, even though a lot of what we're doing was serious. There was a part of my brain that was like, this isn't technically my job. It's something I like to do. And it took me quite a long time to realize that life would have been a lot easier if it had just, there's a part of my brain that actually like clocked in and clocked out. And when that happened to me, that's when I realized, oh, okay, I have to take it seriously now, and be a bit more kind of straight-spined about things. And when you're asked to perform for a show, be in contact with the producer and say, I'm on my way. Send them the invoice when you can. Tell them when they ask you if you want to perform, just say, if you can't, say yes, and then you kind of ask them where you need them, they need you to be, or what time you want them, be easy to work with, basically, the kind of thing I've learned. And because that's the crux of how, your career moving forward is kind of, people will want to know you as someone who is human and fun and kind of, yeah, easy to work with, and know how to defend your work as well at the end of the day. Because as much as writing is a collaboration, it's also your own, your own projects at the end of the day. So know how to defend yourself, and know how to negotiate your contracts, and know how to keep on touch with your emails. Um, and know that you are also able to ask for help. That there are, as you say, it's also important to kind of know how to connect with people and build communities for yourself because it's a lot, and we don't have to be doing what we're doing, but we do because we want to. So we have to find the joy in it, and a lot of the joy is with other people. So yeah, that's a good thing. That's what I ask because I have an answer all the time. Be easy to work with. That's all I'll say.
You
Yeah,
saw that one coming.
yeah, yeah,
I see.
yeah.
That was all my questions. Thank you so much for
Great.
being so generous and answering all of them so elaborately. I
Thank you.
learned
That was
so
so much
much.
fun.
It
No,
was so
thank you
much
for
fun.
making the space for me. And yeah, but you did the Hippodrome Young Poets as well, right?
I did, yeah, yeah.
It's
I think they only did it for a year, so.
yeah. How did you find it?
Oh God, when was that? It was like 2019 and then early 2020. It feels like
Mm.
forever ago now. But
Oh my
yeah, it
God, you were the
was
COVID cohort.
yeah, yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
only cohort, I think they shut down after. I don't think they've
Oh,
done
okay.
following years. But it was a lot of fun. It was with Jacob Rose as the was it the Barbican Young Poets London based
Mm.
one, and then Jasmine Cardozi for the Birmingham one. So it was like a
Mm.
collaboration between the two. It was a lot of fun. It was the first time that I probably really tried to learn spoken word poetry or even just
Mm. Mm.
poetry in general. Because before that, I think I was just trying to figure out by myself. And then,
Mm.
you actually have
Mm.
poets who know what they're doing and
All
like
right.
and like who's been through the whole thing and like it was really I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's
And I'm
great.
always grateful for like Jacob and Jasmine and
Mm.
I love
Mm.
following what they're getting up to. Um
Yeah.
mm,
That's great. Well, if you're in London or if I'm in your area, I'd love to catch up and talk
yes,
more about it. Yeah, and
yes,
maybe we can do
definitely.
readings and stuff as well. So
Oh yes, that would be
fun.
great. And I would
Yeah.
definitely look out for Neon Manila when it comes out. I'm
Yeah,
really
I'll let you
excited.
know. The launch is 3rd of November. But I'm
Mm.
looking to do like shows everywhere anyway, so I'll let you know, and then maybe we could think
Yes.
of something. So
Yes,
that'd be
if you have a tour day, a tour stop in Birmingham,
yeah.
let me know and I'll
Yes, I'm
see.
thinking about it. Yeah, because I know some people in Birmingham, and I was there for Verve,
Yes, yeah,
in
every
February.
February.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
I
yeah,
don't think
we'll
I
see.
went this year. I don't know what I
No.
was doing in February. Anyway, that feels like forever ago as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully we get to catch up in person soon.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll try and come to Birmingham sometime soon. I'd love to see you all. It's good to see you, Lira.
You
Ingat
too,
ka.
Troy. You too. Bye bye.